Coronation Street teases that beneath the surface of concern and sympathy, a much darker truth has begun to unfold in Gary's life. It began not long after he was released from the hospital, when friends and family surrounded him with kindness, praise, and soft words meant to comfort. Everyone seemed eager to remind him of how lucky he was, how brave, how strong. But the words began to feel hollow, especially when one careless remark from Liam brought everything crashing down. It was an offhand comment, made innocently during breakfast, while the household bustled around Gary like he was made of glass. Liam, attempting to be helpful, had simply said, "At least you're not as strong as before, now you'll have to let people help you." The sentence landed like a punch. Not because of its intent, but because of the echo it created inside Gary's head. He had always prided himself on being the protector, the pillar. But now he couldn't even lift a box without needing to rest. The shame that followed was cold and consuming. Maria noticed it first. The way he stared at the wall too long. The way his smiles never reached his eyes. The way he flinched at compliments, as though praise had become painful. She tried to reassure him, tried to ease the growing pressure she could sense in him. But Gary was beginning to spiral, pulled down by invisible currents of inadequacy and fear. The worst part was that Gary didn't know how to talk about it. Instead, he deflected. He insisted he was fine. He said he just needed rest. But his restlessness betrayed him. He couldn't sit still, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at himself in the mirror for long. One evening, unable to take the stifling concern in the house, Gary went to the pub. At first, he tried to act normal. He laughed too loudly, ordered a drink he didn't finish, and engaged in forced conversation. But his hands were shaking. He kept checking his phone, not for any messages, but just to avoid eye contact. The noise in his head was louder than the pub's background chatter. Then, suddenly, he stood up too quickly, his balance betraying him. He staggered, reached for the edge of the bar, missed it, and collapsed. It all happened in a flash, and the pub fell silent. David, sitting nearby, rushed to his side, helping him up and insisting on taking him home. The fall shook Gary more than the impact. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was confirmation of everything he feared. That he was weak. That he was broken. Back at home, Maria was waiting. She hadn't been told yet about the fall, but one look at Gary's pale, unsettled face and David's careful silence was enough to fill in the blanks. She waited until David left, then confronted Gary with gentle urgency. "This isn't nothing, Gary," she said softly. "Something's wrong, and pretending it's not isn't going to help." Gary brushed her off, claiming it had just been a dizzy spell, a bad drink, stress. But Maria wasn't convinced. She began noticing more, his isolation, his avoidance of any physical tasks, how often he sat staring into space. Desperate to understand, she did what she hadn't wanted to do, she searched his online history. And what she found only deepened her fear. Forums. Articles. Symptoms of male depression. Threads about feelings of worthlessness. Maria's heart broke as she read. She realized Gary was trying to understand himself in the only way he knew how, by researching it alone, in the dark. When she brought it up, Gary exploded. Not loudly, but with a bitter, cold rage. "You went through my things," he snapped. "You think I'm some weak man who needs diagnosing from the internet?" Maria held her ground. "I think you're hurting. And I think you don't know how to let anyone help." That truth hit Gary harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He turned away, ashamed. But Maria stepped closer. "You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to protect everyone. Just let someone protect you, for once." The silence that followed was heavy. Gary didn't answer. He simply walked out of the room. Later that night, Maria found him sitting in the garden, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "I don't know who I am if I'm not the strong one," he murmured. "I feel like I'm disappearing." Maria sat beside him and took his hand. "Then let's figure it out together. Who you are now, not who you used to be." Gary didn't reply. But he didn't pull away either. The wind moved gently through the leaves above them, and for a brief moment, the crushing weight on Gary's chest lifted, just slightly. In the days that followed, Gary tried harder to convince everyone he was on the mend. He began waking early, making tea for Maria, taking short walks with Liam to school, even volunteering to help David with some light repairs around the flat. On the surface, it was progress. But underneath, something still festered. A silent war waging within him, one that no amount of smiles or small gestures could silence. Maria, though relieved by his apparent improvement, couldn't ignore the hollowness in his eyes. It was the kind of vacancy that appeared when he thought no one was watching. She knew the truth. Gary was performing stability, not living it. The turning point came unexpectedly one afternoon when Liam returned from school and announced they were doing a project on personal heroes. "I picked you," he said to Gary with wide, admiring eyes. "Because you're strong and brave and saved people." Gary froze. Maria watched him carefully, sensing the tightness in his body. Liam waited for his father to respond, but Gary couldn't bring himself to smile. "I'm not that guy anymore, Liam," he said quietly, voice cracking at the edges. Liam blinked, confused. "Yes, you are." Gary left the room. That night, Maria found him again, sitting at the edge of their bed with the lights off. He was staring at his hands like he didn't recognize them. "I didn't mean to hurt him," Gary whispered. "You didn't," Maria replied. "He's proud of you. He sees the best in you." "I don't see it." She sat beside him, looping her arm through his. "Then let me see it for you, until you can again." Gary leaned into her, broken, but finally willing to share the weight. But it wasn't over. The next morning, he awoke to a panic attack that stole the air from his lungs. Maria rushed to his side, guiding him through breathing exercises, rubbing his back, whispering reassurances. Afterward, Gary cried, not out of pain, but out of shame. "I thought I was past this," he said between breaths. "You haven't even started yet," Maria replied. "You're not alone, Gary. But you need help. Real help." Gary nodded slowly. Maria helped him book an appointment with a mental health counselor. At first, he was resistant, attending sessions with his guard up, offering vague responses and hiding behind jokes. But over time, something shifted. He started speaking about his childhood, about his fear of failure, about the guilt he still carried from things long past. He opened up about the pressure of always needing to be strong, and how that identity had become a cage. Meanwhile, Liam remained unaware of the storm beneath the surface. Maria gently tried to explain to him that his father was feeling a bit unwell in his heart and mind and needed support, just like someone with a physical injury. Liam nodded with the quiet wisdom only children possessed, and made a point to hug Gary every day. One day, during a session, the therapist asked Gary, "What do you think would happen if you let yourself be weak?" Gary laughed bitterly. "I'd fall apart." "And then what?" "I don't know," Gary admitted. "Maybe I'd stop pretending." "Would that be so bad?" The question haunted him. At home, Maria found herself growing stronger too. Not just in support of Gary, but in her own clarity. She realized that loving Gary didn't mean fixing him, it meant walking beside him as he fixed himself. That was a shift. She stopped pushing, stopped prying, and simply stayed. Then came the day Gary returned to the pub, not to drink, but to apologize. To David. To the others. He told them he'd been struggling, that he wasn't okay, but that he was working on it. The honesty surprised them. And something surprising happened in return. They respected him more for it. Even more unexpectedly, David opened up about his own dark days, something they'd never really talked about. The bond between them, long defined by mutual responsibility, shifted into something more authentic. Gary left the pub that day not with a drink in hand, but with a quiet sense of dignity. Still, there were setbacks. Nights when he couldn't sleep. Moments when old anger resurfaced, sharp and irrational. But each time, Maria was there. And each time, Gary reached out sooner. One afternoon, as autumn leaves began to fall across the cobbled streets, Gary sat on the bench outside the house watching Liam ride his bike in circles. He smiled, not out of obligation, but because it felt real. For the first time in months, he felt present. Maria came out and handed him a cup of tea. "He's getting better, isn't he?" she said, watching Liam. Gary nodded. "We both are. He wasn't cured. Healing doesn't work like that." But he was healing, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Gary decided to join a local men's mental health support group. The first meeting was awkward, but as stories were shared, he realized he wasn't alone. He began speaking, first timidly, then with more strength. His words mattered. His story mattered. Back at home, Maria found a new respect for her husband, not because he had regained his old strength, but because he was finding new strength in vulnerability. And Liam, ever observant, began telling people that his dad was his hero, because he never gives up, even when he's scared. Gary heard that once, just in passing. And he smiled to himself, because maybe, just maybe, he was becoming that hero after all. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to walk toward, one step at a time.